Cześć, poćwiczymy angielski? Okay. So my talk is about optimizing memory subsystem. This is something that we usually don't think about. This is something we take for granted, so we will take a deeper dive today. So let us start with something easy for the beginning. You probably know these definitions very well, big O, big theta, and so on, notation. The interesting part about this notation is that there's nothing about computer inside here, right? It's just pure mathematical functions. And this is by design, obviously, because we want the complexity to be independent of the machine, right? Whether you run it on your own laptop or some powerful server machine, the complexity should be the same. So it's independent of the machine. But the question is it really? Okay, I'll ask you some questions. If you know the answer, then you can raise your hand, and if you're correct, you'll get some small souvenir from us. Does anybody know what's this computing machine? Yeah? Yeah, let's say it's a Turing machine. It's actually a physical model of a Turing machine. Okay, but yeah. And what do we know about Turing machine? It's known to be able to compute everything that's computable. It was used to show the idea of the halting problem, okay? But if we take a complexity of some basic task, like finding minimum or sorting, something is off, right? This is not the complexities you know for these problems, right? And pattern search is not linear here, like it's n times m at the best. So obviously, actually, you have to take into account some notion of the machine, like these complexity functions are not completely independent of the machine that executes these algorithms, right? So that takes us to the second question. So if Turing machine is not the computational model that you use your everyday complexity analysis, then what is the model that we actually use? Okay? No, not really. Something else? Okay, in the red sweatshirt? Okay, anybody? Okay, so I will tell you. The name of the model is called random access machine. We don't use Turing machine or some probabilistic Turing machines and so on. There's a model defined and called random access machine, not to confuse with random access memory. The acronym is the same. But actually, random access memory has much in common with this computational model, because the main assumption here is that we have a constant time access to random part of memory, right? And I want to challenge this assumption a little bit. Is access to memory actually constant time? So here's a small diagram of computer architecture. Basically, you have CPUs, cores of a CPU with L1 cache, L2 cache. We have main memory and maybe some storage. And for the different sizes of these L1, L2, L3 caches, we see that the sizes grow exponentially. Each next layer is much, much bigger, right? And if we take into account access times, we can also see that access to these caches and memory and then storage also grows exponentially. And this is no coincidence, right? Obviously, each next layer is further away from the CPU, from the computation, but also just the sheer size of the memory makes it more difficult to find information inside this cache or memory or whatever, right? Like if I give you a question, how long it will take you to find your friend in a small room, and how much time would it take you to find your friend in this hall, the answer is completely different, right? So basically, this is just a physical limitation. The smaller the medium, the capacity is less, the easier it is to find it, and the latency is better, right? So taking this into account, let us make a short experiment. So assume we have a linked list whose nodes are put into memory in some random locations, and we want to iterate over it. So if the access to memory is actually really constant time, then iterating through the linked list should take us linear time, right? Linear complexity. And let's say we have a few cases here, a small linked list, some larger ones, and we see that actually time to traverse a linked list that is 8 times bigger is not 8 times larger. And why? Because the smallest linked list fits completely into L1 cache, which is very fast, right? And the bigger the linked list, we hit other layers of the next layers of cache and main memory if the linked list doesn't fit into cache at all. And we see that this it's not linear growth here, right? So we could say that the conclusion would have to be that memory is memory access is not constant time, right? And it's more like logarithmic. But obviously, this is just a simple case because in this example, we visit every node of the linked list exactly once. And if there would be like there would be a different distribution of accesses, the analysis would be more complex, definitely, right? But also, you could say that this analysis is also a little bit off because when we analyze complexity, we look into infinities, right? Into what happens in the infinity. And you could say there's like just a limited fixed number of these layers, L1, L2, L3, and then main memory, and that's all. So you could say that after certain size, the next growth would be already linear. But I want to also challenge this assumption because memory also is not uniform. For instance, if we have a multi-socket server machine with multiple processors, then memory channels are attached and memory modules are attached to different processors. And we have this thing called non-uniform memory access, which means that if your data input of your problem is too large that it overflows the memory of the other CPU, this memory will be slower and way slower than the memory attached to the CPU that's actually executing the program, right? And that's not all, because nowadays there are new technologies entering the market. We have something called memory disaggregation, which means that multiple servers, actually separate computers, can use common memory pool for main memory, which is maybe a few meters away from the server, and they can share the memory pool either through network interface or through Compute Express Link interface. And additionally, there can be some switches on the way to the memory modules. So the more the switches, and if we have a larger capacity, more modules, we need some layers of switching, then the access time to the memory is even bigger. So we'll definitely have slower and slower memory with growing capacities, and also non-uniform memory access. And to add to the injury, we also have different memory technologies. Like currently, everybody knows DRAM, right? We all use DRAM in servers, laptops, and so on. But there are many different memory technologies currently in research. Some already hit the market. And these technologies have different performance characteristics. For instance, they could have a larger capacity, but they could be much slower than DRAM, for instance. And there are actually already such server configurations where you have a little bit of fast or regular DRAM and a lot of slower phase change memory. So this is something that we already have to deal with. And the question is, if we know that the memory is not always cheap to access, and some of the memory accesses could be way slower or like really slow compared to the others, how do we deal with this from a programming point of view? And I want to show you quickly 3 approaches how to deal with this. So the first is basically to avoid memory access altogether if this is possible. So like it's about utilizing cache better. And then, if we really need to go to memory, we could try to prefetch data, and we could do tiering. And I'll talk about this right now. So for prefetching, for cache-friendly access to memory, this is something you probably know. We have a two-dimensional arrays, and if we access the arrays in the wrong order, cells versus rows, we will get much worse performance. I hope you know which one is better. Basically, it's because if we iterate through a row, the accesses are sequential, and the next ints that are close to each other will share the same cache line. And if you're talking already about a cache line, so my next question is, how large is a typical cache line? Does anyone want to share?
64
bytes. Is it really always 64? Oh yeah, this is the correct answer, right? Who said it? Okay, I cannot see too much of you, but you get a souvenir. So yeah, the correct answer is it depends, because usually it's 64 bytes, but for instance in Huawei Kumpeng processors, 64 bytes for L1 and L2 cache, but 128 for L3 cache, so it's not always the same. And okay, we can see that we can have drastically different performance depending on how we write the code. But this is something that's not that interesting. Let's go to data structures. Here we have two kinds of trees that we can use to index data. And the one on the left will be much better for cache, because the representation is much denser. Multiple keys can share the same cache line. And because of the fan of the tree, which is bigger, the height of the tree will be less. So less memory jumps, less pointer chasing, right? And here we go to the next question. Do you know which data structure is it actually? Yeah? One again? B tree. Not exactly. Yeah? B plus tree. And how do you know it's a B plus tree? Because the leaves are connected like a linked list, right? That's something that we can use to identify the structure. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so, but you know, the cache tricks can take you only so far. At some point, you need to access the main memory. And if the main memory will be really slow, like far memory, attached memory pool, something, the latency will kill us. So what we can do is try to prefetch the data. And we actually already have hardware prefetchers in CPUs, which actually detect accesses, subsequent accesses to the memory, which are close to each other, and predict a pattern that will continue in the loop. And they try to prefetch and start downloading the data to the CPU before it's actually needed. That way we can completely hide latency. So, problem solved, right? But not completely, because for instance, the hardware prefetchers have some issues. They work on physical addresses, not virtual addresses that our programs use. So they detect accesses to physical memory, and if the mapping between virtual and pages and physical frames is not linear, the hardware prefetcher will lose track of the access at boundaries of pages, right? This is one issue. The other bigger issue is that if you have indirection, so it's a common case, especially in high-level programming languages, where you have array of pointers or references to other objects, then hardware prefetching cannot give us much speed up, because we would have to actually prefetch not the pointer that points to something, but what the pointer points to. And hardware prefetchers usually cannot do that, because they don't see our program. They see only subsequent accesses to physical memory. They cannot predict where will be the next access, because it will be completely random. But you could ask, like, maybe somebody tried to implement such a special hardware prefetcher that will be able to predict and prefetch the indirect memory accesses. And actually, yeah, there are some implementations, like the one from Apple, which was shown to be a major security leak because of side channel attacks. So if you're interested, you can read more about it. So it's not an easy topic, right? Okay, but we have yet another approach called software prefetching, where we put hints in the program to tell the CPU what will be accessed next to start prefetching. And then we don't have so much security issues. We don't have problems in direction. We can manage it all. But the biggest issue here is how to detect what would be the good distance. So how far in advance should we start prefetching? And this is actually a very difficult question. And if you go on the internet, try to research how to do software prefetching, you only find posts that tell you just don't do it. It never works, it's too difficult, and so on. It doesn't work in practice. And then there's like also another question. It's already difficult to write your program using software prefetching, but how do we do it automatically at the compiler level? Like, so we can recompile every program and automatically add such prefetching. And this is an example of our intern projects at Huawei. So if you're willing to do such stuff, then you're welcome. Okay, and I'm going to the last approach that I would like to talk about. And this is called memory tiering. So the idea is that if we know that we have different kinds of memory, local memory, far memory, memory of different backing media, so DRAM or SRAM or HBM memory, whatever, we could try to provide an API to the programmer, which would allow the programmer to allocate the memory, the objects that the application needs in different kinds of memory. So for instance, we have a Redis, which is a key value data store, and we could, it's quite obvious that keys are usually more important than values for indexing. They are accessed more frequently, and they are smaller, so they are a good candidate to put in the fastest possible memory tier, and to put the less important data in the slower memory tier. And this can be done, but it requires the programmer to rewrite the application. And we have so many legacy software, nobody's willing to rewrite everything, right? So we want to do it automatically. And how can we do it? For instance, we can do it on the operating system level, on the kernel level, using page migration mechanism. This is something that already exists. Page migration is used to page out data to swap, or to move pages between CPU and GPU memory. We have multiple different kinds of main memory. You can also swap pages between different types of memory based on their hotness. Like, so more important pages go to better memory, less important go to slower memory, and so on. But here's an issue with this approach. Pages is like, the page size is quite big. And also, I wonder if somebody knows what's a typical page size? 4 gigabytes? Kilobytes. Yeah, that's the correct answer. Usually, but because the question is about typical. So like, here's a small table for different architectures, and you can see there's like many different configurations. But yeah, 4 kilobytes are the most common. But even 4 kilobytes, this is something that's usually much bigger than the average size of your object you use in your daily programming, which means that in a single page, there will be a mix of hot and cold objects, and moving the entire page from hot to cold memory doesn't give us good results. So we can try to do migration based on object granularity. We could try to move individual objects, and you can ask, like, how can we move objects which were already allocated in some part of memory? And in native applications, we cannot do it, but in managed memory systems like JVM or C#.NET, actually the garbage collector algorithm keeps moving the objects from time to time, from one region to another, and this is something that we can tap into and try to optimize the process to leverage also the knowledge about different kinds of memory, and this is something that also we do at Huawei, just to poke some interest into it. Okay, and that's all from me. Thank you.